But Sancho pulled the goal back, and then I think Spurs floundered a bit, and Chelsea started to believe. And I think with the balance of play, Chelsea were the better team, and I don't know how this happens all the time, because Frank Lampard was always speaking in terms of whenever we went to White Hart Lane, we knew we were coming back with the points.
So many Spurs lads, famously.
and that idea has continued regardless of who's at the helm, which players either team has. That always seems to happen. And I think Spurs performed poorly in this particular game, man. And yes, Chelsea have got the talent, and I think they were the better side. The fact that they came back from 2 goals down to win eventually 4-3 because they allowed another goal in. The curious thing about Chelsea, Jay, is this, and I think maybe they should stay humble, the Chelsea fans. Chelsea are always conceding goals. They'll win, but they're always conceding goals. In a game where you usurped the dominance or the balance of play, and you became the team in the pound seat, you don't concede again in the end and give them a bit of hope. But all in all, Jay, I think what the manager did right was tactically, and also he's got the personnel. When you've got Caicedo, when you've got Lucas Lavia, when you've got Enzo, chances are you win a lot of those midfield battles because Spurs don't have much to compete with. So I think Chelsea are looking good, man. When you've got Cole Palmer and he's always directly involved in something, if it's not a penalty, he's creating something. And it seems like the cast around him are starting to perform, except for Nicholas Jackson, when you finally put him into your FPL team and then he doesn't give you anything. But I think, all in all, I think it was a composed performance from them. They didn't panic. They went 2 goals behind, didn't panic. They played their football, because eventually, if you keep giving them the ball, some magic will come from them. If not Palmer, Sancho, like we saw in this game. If not him, Neto tried as well. So I think, Jay, they're there, man. They're there. They can't be ignored. The fans need to start saying that they are title contenders. Yes, they don't want to put the pressure on themselves, but they genuinely are at this point.
That's the trick, Chuck. You mentioned Jackson, okay, and it hasn't worked out recently. But also, like in that match against Spurs, like absolutely no one in the world. And here comes Nicholas Jackson with a back heel. Jackson loves his back heels, and he kept on giving them in the box, and it actually led to some chances. But if it's not Jackson, it's Palmer, right? And if not Palmer, you did mention Pedro Neto. Now you have an Enzo who was languishing on the bench, and he's come into the team now, and he's scoring goals, and he's assisting goals, and he seems to have hit his best form at Chelsea. And this is what Chelsea have for me, and this is why I envy them as a fan of Arsenal. They've got game breakers, Chuck. You mentioned the fact that they score 4, right, to win the game, but they concede 3 goals. So that does make you wonder, like, is that really a genuine title contender when you can't be playing that level of exciting games week in, week out and try to win the title, because eventually you're going to get got, you know? But the thing is with Chelsea, and they are still very raw and they're still developing under Maresca, but what they do have is they have talent, and this is the model that Real Madrid have used over the entire time we've watched Real Madrid in terms of how they build squads. You don't think of Real Madrid famously as, this is the style of play, you know, this is the Real Madrid way, in terms of the same way you think of Barcelona and tiki-taka, whatever the case may be. But what they tend to have is talent that supersedes the talent on the other team, and usually it wins out. And at Chelsea, as I'm saying, they have game breakers throughout that field, because you do think about a Palmer. Like Palmer, he can be absent during the game for large periods of the game, but then you know when he's in and around the edge of the box, you better watch out, because what's bound to happen is there's going to be a goal, or someone's going to trip and fall, and there's going to be a penalty, and there's going to be a goal anyway, because it's automatic from the 12-yard spot, you know. And if he's not doing that, he's providing goals for Jackson. Jackson is not, he didn't play in the previous game, and he didn't score against Spurs. But then now, as I'm saying, you've got Enzo, and Enzo is a hugely talented player. That's why he was bought for the money he was bought for from Benfica. And then you have a Pedro Neto. He can play on the right. He can play on the left. Wherever you need him to deputize on the wing, he can be there, and he's equally adept with both feet and playing on both sides. And now you have Jadon Sancho. When Sancho was signed by Chelsea from Manchester United, yes, he had a good season at Dortmund last season. Not a great final in the Champions League, and you wondered that maybe Sancho is not quite that guy, you know. And even at Chelsea, he's had some good performances, but he hasn't like locked down a starting position. But then he shows up and he does what he does and he reminds you of the talent of Jadon Sancho. And the reason Chelsea signed Jadon Sancho was not because they thought to themselves, I don't believe, at least, maybe Maresca comes out and he says differently, that this is the perfect guy for the system that we want to play. I think in my head it was, there's another hugely talented guy. Let's bring him in. It's high upside and it's a very high floor, right? That if it doesn't work out, it's already what we've seen at Manchester United, and then he can go back. Or even if you sign him, it's exactly what Liverpool tried to do with Chiesa, right? Where you sign him for not much of a fee, and if it works out, my goodness, what a coup. If it doesn't, well, we didn't really have our eggs in his basket, and it seems to be going in the right direction with Sancho. So, having said all of that, Chuck, I do think they're title contenders. In another season, I think. Let me qualify this, right? I think what registers as a title contender is the context of the season that they are contending. I think if this was one of those seasons where it looks very obvious that Manchester City and Liverpool are going to score 90, 95, close to 100 points, then I'd say no.
Yeah.
But in this season, we've seen, yes, Liverpool get off to a great start and pull out a gap. And call me a hater, but I'm still not yet convinced that is in the bag. I say that as a fan of Arsenal who wants to see them bottle, right? But if I'm actually looking at Liverpool, Chuck, I honestly do think they are a Mo Salah slump in form or injury, knock wood, away from coming back to the rest of the pack. And as a result, I don't think that the gap between them and the rest of the field is that large. And where Chelsea find themselves in the group with Arsenal and Arsenal, who are reliant on set pieces to score their goals and who lack that firepower that Chelsea have, and then a Manchester City who are having their worst season under Pep Guardiola, certainly their worst start under Pep Guardiola. You have to look at Chelsea now, 4 points off the top of the log. Yes, with Liverpool having a game in hand. But this is Chelsea having played all of, quote unquote, the big teams or the title challenges with a more agreeable schedule ahead of them. That, yeah, they are title contenders, especially because Maresca, in this period, which we know is a vital one towards shaping the rest of the season, he is rotating his players. He's been doing that in that third tier European tournament, the Conference League. I don't even know it because my teams don't play in that competition, and now he's brought it into the Premier League. In the last game, they went away and they scored 5 goals with a much changed team, and now went 2-0 down against Spurs and came back, scored 4 goals with what you would consider the first team. And there are still players that he's still reintroducing into the team. We might see Mudryk come good. We might see Nkunku, who when he plays, he seems to be scoring now, come good as well. So he's creating that competition, he's creating that depth. They have the results, the confidence is growing. And when you look at the competition, you can't say, oh man, this is like the greatest and the deepest field ever assembled in a title chase. So they're in a title chase.
You know what they've done, Jay? They've made us forget that at some point we saw them as London Cowboys. Because we were seeing Todd Bowley spend £1 billion, and we're like, what's going on with this team? They've got all the talent in the world, this and that, and now that's far removed from where they are now. Right now, they are properly Chelsea, almost vintage Chelsea, in terms of they've got quality.
No, Chuck. They are vintage Chelsea when they stop conceding goals.
Okay, actually, with the John Terry's and yes. Okay, that's probably true. But in terms of actually being there, mixing themselves in and around with the big boys, because as you said, Jane, in terms of what they have is something that Arsenal don't have. And Arsenal, fine, for what they don't have, they've got set pieces, right? Because yet again, they scored from a set piece, and the one goal that they scored in open play was disallowed for offside. And I guess that's what they negate when they have set pieces, right? But what they have, Jay, is that when you look at their makeup now, Caicedo had to play right back because all 3 of the midfielders are playing so well, so you had to fit all 3 of them in there. When you look at someone like Hulabi, who didn't finish the game, he was a menace to deal with in the center of the pitch because he was everywhere. And you're like, okay, you got Lavia, you've got Fernandes, you've got Caicedo, and there's like all those other talented behind them and in front of them. Okay, not behind them because they concede goals a lot. So I think they finally come good basically in terms of all the talent that they've bought, all the players who've been registered under Chelsea. I don't know what's the number at this point, 60. Remember they had like 2 changing rooms and some people had to change in the youth locker room. Like we've forgotten all about that because now the football is doing the talking. Now the goals are coming in. Now they've got star players and you're like, okay, let's sit up and take notice. So I think Maresca's doing a good job. I think their management of that said talent as well is good. I think it's been a blessing in disguise to have the Conference League, Jay, because the players are playing there without any pressure. It's like another Carabao Cup. Go in there, get game time, play, get used to the system, and after a while you'll come back. I don't know if this helps Chilwell at some point. Maybe Chilwell will come back later in the season if there are enough injuries. I don't know.
Because those when players stay fresh.
Yeah,
because they're not playing in Europa or the Champions League midweek, and they have to come back and on the weekends to play games. That's what happened with Arsenal 2 seasons ago, right? When they launched their first title challenge, that they were not in the Champions League. They had Europa, but the early parts of Europa, you played a much changed team, so they were fresh going to those games in the Premier League, and that's what we're seeing with Chelsea.
Yeah, and the benefit of that, like for instance, I know Maresca had a preseason, unlike Ruben Amorim. Amorim was saying the games come so quickly that you can't have too many training sessions in between to implement your ideas. But if you've got a second team playing somewhere in Russia, you guys can train the first team. And you can implement your ideas, and you can get solid ideas in terms of how you guys are adapting to those said tactics. So I think that tournament is helping them a bit. But all in all, I think it's a good job in terms of the personnel and the tactics. Obviously, they should concede less goals, but so far so good, and I think they're genuine contenders.